What is happening here?
There's nothing left to say right now about that.
When the latest episode of Sister Wives aired, no one was prepared for the emotional eruption that followed, least of all Kody Brown. But the minute the footage hit the screen, something in him snapped in a way even longtime viewers hadn't seen before. And what happened afterward is what set the tone for one of the most chaotic days the Brown family has faced in years. The episode itself seemed harmless on the surface, just another deep dive into the complicated dynamics between Kody, his ex-wives, and the choices he's made since the family began falling apart. But this one was different. This one had footage the producers had never shown, clips showing raw, unfiltered arguments, quiet moments of realization, and discussions that Kody thought were private. He walked into this screening already on edge, but within minutes, the tension inside him began to build. It started with a scene showing Christine talking candidly about the years she spent feeling unheard, unvalued, and emotionally sidelined. She didn't hold back this time. She explained how she spent nights crying alone, how she tried to communicate her pain, and how she slowly realized Kody wasn't listening, not because he didn't hear her, but because he didn't want to. Christine's voice was steady, heartbreaking, and honest. The audience watching the episode felt it. So did the producers. And most importantly, so did Kody. As he listened to Christine speak, cameras captured him tightening his jaw, narrowing his eyes, and bouncing his leg anxiously. He shifted in his seat, huffed sharply, and muttered under his breath. But he still tried to keep it together. That didn't last long. The second clip was even worse than the first one. It was footage that the online fan base had been speculating about for months. Whispers, rumors, leaks, all questioning whether TLC had been holding back moments to protect the show's narrative. In this new episode, they finally decided to release it. The clip showed an argument that was really one of the most intense between Kody and Janelle, and in fact, it was full context, not edited and watered down, as viewers had probably previously seen. Janelle spoke with fierce emotion as she called out years of broken promises, favoritism, and manipulation. And for once, the audience saw a side of Kody that was impossible to defend. On screen, the argument escalated, and Kody's face turned red. His hands clenched into fists. He leaned forward, as if he wanted to jump into the screen and defend himself. The longer he watched, the more explosive his reaction became. He shook his head repeatedly, muttering, "This is taken out of context, this is edited, this is unfair, and they weren't supposed to show this." But the real watershed moment came when the episode segued to Robyn. The version that had appeared on air always made her out to be emotional, sensitive, and overwhelmed by the unraveling of the family. But the new footage showed something else. Conversations where Robyn expressed frustration with Kody's inability to keep a balance between households. She confessed that she did not know the man he had become, that she felt guilt for the favoritism people blamed her for, and that she was afraid she contributed to the family's downfall. This footage contradicted the image Kody had been fighting to protect. He had always said Robyn was innocent, that criticisms against her were unfounded, and that the other wives were jealous or bitter. But with the evidence now playing in front of him, the very foundation of that narrative cracked. When the moment Robyn said, "I wish he would just listen to them sometimes," Kody stood abruptly from his chair. The microphone picked up the sound of it falling from his lap. He began pacing the room, running his hands through his hair first on one side and then on the other. The crew tried to keep him calm, but it was beyond that point by then. He felt betrayed by the producers, embarrassed by that aired footage, and panicked by how this would reshape public opinion. He stormed out of the screening room, slamming the door behind him. But he didn't stop there. Off camera, Kody stormed out into the hall and confronted the producers, demanding to know why they had included that footage. Why now? Why would they humiliate him like this? His voice echoed through the building, loud enough that several staffers clearly heard him. He accused them of trying to sabotage his image, of pushing a narrative that would surely villainize him, and of manipulating the show for ratings. According to crew members present that day, Kody wasn't just angry, he was terrified. Not of the footage itself, but of what it meant for his future. The public had already shifted heavily toward the wives after their separations. Christine had become a fan favorite. Janelle had gained immense support. Even Mary, despite her complicated past, was being viewed with sympathy. Meanwhile, Kody's reputation had been sinking episode by episode. This new footage would ensure that the trend did not change. If anything, it would accelerate his decline. As he continued pacing the hallway, Kody pointed fingers everywhere, at Christine for speaking her truth, at Janelle for challenging him, at Robin for expressing doubts, at TLC for airing the footage, and even at the fans themselves for not understanding him. One of the producers finally intervened, attempting to defuse the situation. They explained that the network felt the audience was entitled to honesty, that the viewers had been demanding to hear what really went down, that everyone's emotions had been running on high, not just Kody's. But at that particular moment, none of that meant a thing to him. He felt cornered, exposed, and powerless, three feelings he despised. Within minutes, cameras captured him leaving the building altogether. He gets into his car, slams the door, and speeds away. But even that wasn't the end. When he arrived home, Robin was waiting. She had already seen clips from the episode. She already knew what was coming. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't try to comfort him. Instead, she looked disappointed, an expression Kody rarely saw from her. She asked why he reacted so aggressively and why he acted as though the footage was an attack rather than a reflection of things he actually said and did. Kody felt blindsided by this. He had expected Robin to take his side immediately. Instead, she calmly told him maybe, just maybe, it was time he considered the possibility that the other wives weren't exaggerating, that the pain they expressed wasn't invented, and that the chaos the family experienced had its roots far deeper than in editing or storytelling choices. Coming from Robin, this hit Kody harder than anything the show could have revealed. It was not just the episode that set him off. It was a realization that he could no longer control the narrative anymore, not even within his own home. And from that instant onward, his panic only increased. Kody paced across the living room of the rental, a storm ready to break. The early morning light hadn't even fully settled across the floor, and he was already on edge, checking his phone every few seconds, muttering under his breath about the new episode. It wasn't even officially aired to the public yet. Only the production team, TLC executives, and of course the cast had early access. And that was the problem, because Kody had already seen enough to know that this episode was nothing like what he expected. It wasn't a simple recap, it wasn't light drama, it wasn't a storyline he could spin into a narrative that made him look misunderstood. This episode cut directly into the raw truth he'd tried to hide for years. And he knew exactly who he blamed for that: Christine. Her confessionals were fiery, direct, and brutally honest, and worst of all, impossible to twist. The instant the preview rolled across the screen, he knew he'd be dealing with the fallout for months, not just online, not just with the family, but with himself. There was something deeply humiliating about being exposed by someone who had once loved him more fiercely than anyone else. He snatched his jacket, acting like there was somewhere he needed to go urgently, but the truth was that he didn't know where he was actually going. Anger does that, impels a person out of the house and out into who knows where. He slammed the door hard behind him, the frame rattling, hoping the house would somehow absorb the frustration he couldn't process. He climbed into his truck, started the ignition, and let the engine roar, anything to drown out the quiet ringing in his mind, caused by the scenes of the episode replaying over and over. Christine sat comfortably in her new home, smiling in a way she hadn't in years. Christine saying she felt finally free. Christine had acknowledged that the hardest part wasn't leaving a marriage, but surviving it. Christine telling the cameras what really went on behind the scenes. And worst of all, Christine revealing the moment she knew Kody no longer loved her. He struck the steering wheel with the palm of his hand, once, twice, 3 times, as if the harder he hit, the more he could force those words out of existence. But he couldn't. Truth had a way of carving itself into the mind, and this truth was sharp. The production crew was ready to go as Kody drove aimlessly around town. But this time, they weren't tiptoeing around his mood. They'd already captured it on camera. His irritation, the tightness of his voice, the snapping over even minuscule problems. They knew viewers would cling to every expression, every slip of emotion, every defensive rant. Because the audience had changed. This wasn't the early seasons anymore. Fans were no longer looking at Kody through the lens of quirky father in a plural family. They'd watched the decline. They'd seen the shift. They'd watched the unraveling. Back at Christine's home, the producers were setting up lights for her segment. She came in with a serene smile that felt natural and not rehearsed or forced. She sat down, looked straight into the camera, and the crew could tell she wasn't holding anything back today. So she didn't even hesitate when the producer asked her about the new episode that was about to air. "It needed to be shown," she said. "People think that I left overnight. They don't know how long I tried." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it, a veracity that pulled the entire room into silence. Meanwhile, Kody finally parked his truck in a grocery store lot. He didn't go inside. He just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to gather his thoughts. The preview had been bad enough, but what really pushed him over the edge wasn't what Christine had said. It was what the children had said. His own children. The episode included a segment he hadn't seen in the editing room yet, Gabe talking about the emotional fallout, Gwendolyn explaining her perspective on years of favoritism, and even Ysabel speaking softly about the pain of being asked to undergo surgery alone. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't dramatized. It was their lived experience. For the first time in a long time, Kody wasn't angry at someone else. He felt cornered by the truth. But instead of letting the truth settle, he pushed it aside, clinging instead to the same narrative he had held onto for years, that he had been misunderstood, disrespected, mistreated by the family he tried to lead. His phone buzzed again. Another notification, another fan comment, another clip circulating online. He didn't open it. Instead, he drove again, this time headed straight for the production office. Inside the office, the mood was tense. Editors had been expecting him since dawn. They knew he'd show up. They knew he would want changes. And they also knew they could not give him what he wanted. When he walked in, he didn't even say hello. "I need the episode recut," he said, his voice flat yet dangerous. The lead producer took a deep breath before answering. "Kody, you know we can't do that. The network approved the final cut. You didn't show my side fairly. We showed your words, your actions, your reactions. That's your side." Kody's jaw tightened. "Christine made me look like I abandoned the family. She spoke about her experience." He took a step closer. "Take it out. It's already scheduled. It's not changing." The room fell silent. Kody realized they weren't bending this time. He wasn't the center of the show anymore, not the way he used to be. Storylines had shifted. Audiences had shifted. The narrative had shifted. Nothing could turn it around. The episode was airing live, precisely as it was. And when it did, the internet would explode. Fans would dissect every moment. Memes would surface. Analysts would create breakdowns. Reaction channels would go through the roof in terms of views. Christine would trend. The kids would trend. And Kody, well, he would too. Just not in the way he wanted. He stormed out of the office, frustration radiating off him like heat waves. He drove home fast, hardly noticing the turns. But as he walked inside, it was the quietness of the house that hit him harder than any argument could. It was empty, not literally, but emotionally. It didn't feel like a family home. It felt like a waiting room where nobody ever showed up. He sat down on the couch, finally allowing the weight of the situation to sink in. The episode wasn't the problem. It was just the mirror, and he didn't like what it reflected. Across town, Christine was filming the final part of her segment. When the producer asked one last question, "Do you think Kody will watch this episode?" she gave a small, almost sad smile. "He'll watch it," she said, "but he won't hear it." The camera crew exchanged knowing looks, because that sentence summarized everything. Kody watched everything, but he heard nothing. And that, more than anything else, was what had destroyed the family. The sun began to set, and Kody sat stock-stilled on the couch as the silence mounted. He knew he'd lost control of the narrative. He knew Christine's voice would echo across this episode, across social media, across the fan base. And for the first time, he couldn't stop it. He couldn't rewrite it. He couldn't blame it on editing. He could not point to anybody else. The truth was out, and the panic he felt was not because Christine had spoken. It was for having spoken the truth. And honesty, well, real, unfiltered honesty, was something with which Kody had never learned to compete. As the new episode aired and the living rooms of millions lit up with the explosive scenes, Kody Brown wasn't watching in the carefree way most viewers do. He was pacing back and forth, furious, rewinding clips, analyzing every frame like it was an attack launched directly at him. And in many ways, it was. Because this episode, more than any other, held a mirror up to his behavior, and the reflection staring back at him was something he couldn't control, couldn't rewrite, and couldn't excuse. For the first time in years, the episode didn't soften his edges. It didn't cut around his anger. It didn't save him with a convenient narrative. Instead, it showed the world what Christine, Janelle, and even Mary had been dealing with behind the scenes. The cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were full-blown fault lines. And as Kody watched, he knew the world was watching too. During the episode, Christine finally opened up about the moment she emotionally checked out of the marriage. Calm voice, steady tone, unshakable clarity. It wasn't explosive, it wasn't crazy, it was honest. And worse, the truth hit harder than any outburst ever could have. Christine explained that she had begged, pleaded, tried to fix something already dead because Kody had checked out long before she did. She spoke to the years of feeling unseen, unheard, devalued, and as those words reverberated across social media, viewers didn't merely sympathize, but united behind her like never before. Meanwhile, Kody's phone was blowing up. Dozens of notifications, angry comments, memes, reaction videos, and every single one made him look worse. His frustration doubled, then tripled, because the episode also showed something he never expected TLC to keep. A moment where he snapped at production, accusing them of manipulating him, pushing him, making him look like the bad guy. But this time, the cameras didn't cut away. They rolled. And that raw, unfiltered frustration, the side of him fans rarely got to see, was the moment that sent the internet into overdrive. In that episode, Janelle had her moment of raw emotion too. She finally confronted the loneliness she had suffered, the empty promises, and the onus of trying to keep this family glued together. And instead of dismissing her, editors allowed her whole story to breathe. It was powerful, real, a Janelle the audience had been waiting to see, and fans instantly rallied behind her. For Kody, that was the worst part. He knew people weren't just seeing what happened, they were seeing why it happened. And then, the scene that really set him off. It was the moment when Christine revealed that she had evidence, journals, conversations, text messages, voice notes, detailing years of subtle neglect, favoritism, and explosive reactions. She didn't reveal them. She didn't have to. The admission was enough. Viewer responses ignited immediately on social. What else does Christine have? What hasn't aired? What hasn't been cut out for years? It was a wildfire of speculation, one Kody couldn't extinguish. This was no longer just a storyline. This was a full narrative shift, one in which he did not get to control the pacing, the tone, or the damage control. And that terrified him. He kept rewinding the episode back in his house, freezing on certain moments, talking to himself out loud as if he could argue his way out of the truth. He kept saying, "That's not what happened," or "That's not how I meant it." But of course, the footage showed exactly how he meant it. His tone, his body language, his defensiveness, all of it undeniable. He had given the world the ammunition, and the episode simply pressed play. Meanwhile, Mary seemed so well composed. She had come to that place where she didn't need Kody's validation, and viewers recognized it right then and there. She spoke about rebuilding her identity, finding her voice again, stepping out of the shadows she had willingly stayed in for too long. And she didn't blame, she didn't accuse, she just accepted the reality and chose peace. And viewers instantly praised her strength. But Kody didn't see strength, he saw betrayal, because the more the episode rolled, the more isolated he looked. The wives weren't ganging up on him, they were telling their own stories, stories he no longer had control over. And for a man who built his life on being the center of the family, the leader, the one with authority, losing control was the real breaking point. This episode didn't just air his missteps, it brought forth his vulnerability, his fear, his loss of power, unraveling relationships. And those raw moments hit harder than any fight or emotional blow-up. The confident patriarch of the earlier seasons was long gone. He was a man watching his empire fall apart, piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop the collapse. Social media erupted. TikTok was filled with edits of Christine's calm strength. Twitter was full of shock reactions to Kody's anger. YouTube commenters uploaded breakdown videos within hours. Fans compared the early seasons to the new one, showing how the family dynamic had drastically shifted. And every analysis reached the same conclusion. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but rather years of bottled-up tension, favoritism, and emotional disconnection. By the time the episode came to a close, Kody was already unraveling. The final scene had Christine musing about her new life, her happiness, her peace. It wasn't a triumphant montage. It was simple, humble, real. And that's what made it sting. Because while Christine talked about freedom, Kody saw it as abandonment. In his mind, she wasn't finding peace. She was destroying the family he believed he built. The camera cut to Kody, who sat alone, isolated and defensive, a man who looked less angry and more exhausted. And for many viewers, it was the first time they saw the full emotional impact of the family falling apart, not through Christine's eyes, but through his. The last line he delivered in the episode wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, almost defeated. "I don't know what to do anymore." By the time the credits rolled, the world had already made up its mind. The internet declared Christine the one who rose above the chaos, while Kody was the symbol of the downfall. And the episode didn't have to exaggerate on anything. It simply showed the truth. Back in his home, he reached for his phone and scrolled through comment after comment, each one landing like a punch to the chest. People calling him controlling, manipulative, a favoritist. Others defending him, saying the editing was unfair. But the overall tone stood loud and clear. The sympathy wasn't with him anymore. The support had shifted. And he could feel the weight of that shift pressing down on him. Because now, it wasn't just the wives against him. It was a story, the fans, the story, and the truth he had spent years avoiding. Kody knew the fallout from this episode wouldn't be contained tonight. It would bleed into tomorrow, the next day, and every day forward when a new person caught the show on streaming. The episode had officially cemented its place as the moment everything changed. And in that instant, as the world spoke, assessed, reacted, and scrutinized each passing second, one thing became painfully obvious. Kody wasn't just reacting to an episode. He was reacting to the consequences he never believed would catch up with him. Kody had always thought he could anticipate their every move, but after the chaos unleashed in the new episode, he was running out of explanations, and even faster, out of excuses. As Part 3 wrapped up, he had convinced himself that he could regain control, smooth things over, and again frame the narrative back in his favor. But the moment cameras settled in for the next day of filming, it became painfully clear that nothing was going to plan. People were talking, the crew was buzzing, and the wives were no longer just reacting, they were strategizing. And Kody sensed it, like a storm under his feet. What shook him most wasn't what the audience heard on camera. It was what happened before filming had even begun that morning. Christine arrived first, which already irritated him. She was smiling, confident, completely unbothered by the emotional explosion he'd had the previous night. She moved around the set with ease, talking to crew members, joking around, showing the energy of someone who had absolutely nothing to hide and absolutely nothing to fear. That confidence poked at Kody in the worst way. He wasn't used to it, not from her. He pulled one of the producers aside, demanding to know why Christine was being given so much freedom. The producer calmly explained that she wasn't given anything extra, she just wasn't asking permission anymore. That comment sent Kody spiraling because deep down he knew it was true. Christine was no longer tethered to him emotionally or spiritually, and the more she moved independently, the more he felt himself shrinking out of relevance. But the real explosion came when the interview chairs were set up and the crew asked each wife to give their honest reaction to the episode. First up, Janelle spoke, her calmness slicing right through whatever was left of Kody's patience. She didn't yell, she didn't insult him, she simply laid out facts. How communication had been broken for years, how favoritism had caused rifts, and how certain promises Kody made were never followed through. Every statement landed like a punch, not because it was exaggerated, but because it was true. When Janelle finished, Kody leaned forward in his chair, breathing audibly. He wanted to interrupt, defend himself, clarify the truth, as he always said, but the producers held him back. They wanted the wives to speak uninterrupted. And that restriction, that loss of power, that inability to control the narrative, it churned in his chest like fire. Then came Mary. She looked exhausted, but not defeated, just done. Done with explaining, done with apologizing for problems she didn't create, done with defending a relationship that she admitted had ended years ago. What shocked the crew wasn't that she finally admitted it was how peacefully she spoke about it. She had accepted the reality long before Kody ever would. And when she finished, she turned calmly to Kody and said something the microphone barely caught. "We're not the same people anymore. That's okay. But what's not okay is pretending we are." The air froze. Everyone felt it. Robin, watching from the side, shifted uncomfortably. She knew this was leading into something big, something unavoidable. And sure enough, the moment Christine was asked to take her seat, Kody stood up, pacing in circles, muttering under his breath. Everyone assumed he was preparing a speech or an angry rebuttal, but no one expected him to lose control this fast. Christine sat down, never once looking at him. She didn't need to. The energy in the room had already said it all. And within seconds of her starting to speak, Kody's face flushed bright red. Christine didn't attack him. She spoke of patterns, of years of excuses, of promises that kept shifting, of how she realized all she had been asking for was basic respect, not special treatment. The crew noticed, too, that she sounded different now, strong, collected, self-assured. Halfway through her answer, Kody finally snapped. "No, no, this is ridiculous," he exclaimed, throwing his hands up as he stormed into frame. "You're twisting everything. You're making it sound like I never cared." Christine didn't bat an eyelid. She merely raised an eyebrow and replied, "I'm telling the truth. If it bothers you, maybe ask yourself why." The room fell dead silent. The crew froze. Producers leaned forward. Camera operators looked at each other. They knew this wasn't footage to cut. This was gold. Raw, unplanned, explosive gold. Kody's breathing was getting louder as he stood over Christine, pointing, gesticulating wildly, trying to dominate the moment the way he had. But Christine wasn't intimidated anymore. She looked tired of him, tired in the way that showed years of pushing through walls that never moved. "Stop rewriting the past," she said. "You got mad every time somebody did something you didn't control. That's not leadership, Kody. That's fear." That sentence hit him harder than anything she had ever said in 25 years. Fear. Christine called it out, publicly, and it exposed the very thing he never wanted anyone to see. The wives knew it, the crew knew it, and the audience watching the episode would know it. In that instant, the ground shifted under Kody. He tried to spin it. He went on a rant about loyalty, about unity, about respect, but none of it landed. Not this time. Because the more he talked, the more obvious it became that he was spiraling, trying desperately to grab hold of something slipping out of his hands. His authority, his image, his version of the truth. Robin stepped forward quietly, placing a calming hand on his arm, but even she couldn't pull him back. He was too far in, too reactive, too defensive, too angry that Christine wasn't shrinking the way she used to. Then Christine said the line that ended all hope of calming the situation. "You cared about control, not connection. And now that you can't control us, you're panicking. Kody froze. His mouth fell open, as if all the air left the room at once. Janelle covered her mouth. Mary closed her eyes. The crew exchanged stunned looks. Kody whispered, "That's not true," but it was weak, deflated. And Christine merely shook her head. The cameras kept rolling. They captured every moment, every twitch in Kody's expression, every crack in his voice, every attempt to regain a power that was no longer his. Once the argument had died down enough for Christine to finish her interview, she calmly walked away. And the instant she was off set, it erupted into a flurry of activity. Producers debated what to do next. Crew members checked their cameras, making sure everything recorded properly. Sound techs replayed audio clips. It was chaos, but not because anyone was confused, rather because everyone grasped the weight of what just occurred. But behind the scenes, the already explosive episode had become something much bigger. The wives had united in truth. Christine had brought truth and a reality check clear and strong. And Kody, he'd unraveled in real time. For the first time ever, he wasn't the storyteller. He was the story. And the world was about to see every unfiltered second of it. Kody stood frozen in the doorway long after the cameras stopped rolling, long after the crew had packed their equipment into black cases, long after the house had fallen into that strange, uneasy quiet that only comes when too many truths have been spoken at once. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even seem to breathe. It was as if the entire night had wrapped itself around him like a tightening rope. His phone buzzed in his pocket, then again, then again. Producers, friends, probably even some fans who'd already seen the explosive segment that had aired earlier than expected. But he ignored every message. The weight of everything he'd watched, everything he'd said, and everything that had been said about him felt heavier than anything he'd carried in years. And upstairs, behind a door he refused to open, Robin sat cross-legged on the floor, replaying the episode on her laptop for the third time. Every time she paused it on Christine's face, she felt a pang in her stomach. Jealousy, anger, fear, all tangled into one. She had defended Kody for years, had believed he wasn't perfect but was trying, had convinced herself that the world was unfair to him. But she could not deny what she had seen on screen now. The raw clips, the unedited confessionals, the moments when even the crew seemed shocked by what they captured. And the way Christine's calm, steady voice delivered blow after blow, truth after truth, without ever raising her voice, without ever slipping from control. Robin felt something crack inside her, something she'd been trying to hold intact for too long. Outside the house, one of the producers sat parked under a street lamp in his car, typing notes. He had watched the whole confrontation earlier in the day. Kody's explosion, the panic, the argument with Robin, the way he stormed off frame, only to be coaxed back because the contract demanded it. It was some of the most intense footage they'd captured in years. Not staged, not coached, pure reality. And they'd all known when they watched it back that this episode, the one that sent Kody spiraling now, would change the trajectory of the show forever. It wasn't just drama, it was the unraveling of a man who'd spent years trying to control the narrative. Meanwhile, Christine was in a totally different world. She had made dinner with Truly, she laughed, she answered fan messages, she seemed lighter than she had been in more than a decade. Her reveal, the one that had set this entire spiral into motion, had not been fueled by anger or revenge. It had been clarity. She told the truth because it was finally time. And she knew the truth would sting. She knew Kody would explode. She knew the network would seize the moment. Still, she knew her voice mattered for the first time in years, and nothing Kody did could silence it now. Back in the house, Kody paced the living room with restless energy. His mind spun through every conversation he'd ever had with Christine, every argument, every moment he felt she undermined him. But now that he had watched her new interview, watched her lay out her final betrayal, the moment she said he crossed a line he could never come back from, he felt something colder than anger. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and worst of all, powerless. He had always believed he controlled the story, that the family revolved around him. But now it was clear that the story had moved on without him, and he was scrambling to catch up. He picked up his phone again, scrolling through messages. Some were sympathetic, some were mocking, some were confused. One in particular jumped out, a long text from Janelle. He opened the message slowly, anticipating some other defense of Christine or attempt to get him to calm down. Instead, he found only a simple message. You need to stop blaming everyone else. That's the only way this ever gets better. He tossed the phone onto the couch, frustrated. He knew she was right, and that infuriated him even more. He walked into the kitchen, leaned on the counter, and stared at the place where the cameras had been set up earlier. He could almost still feel the heat of the lights on his face, the intensity of the producer's questions, the pressure building inside him until he snapped. He replayed the moment he yelled, the instant Robin flinched, that second when he knew he'd gone too far but couldn't pull himself back. He thought about how the crew didn't even pause recording. They just captured it all because they knew this was the moment the entire season had been building toward. That moment was everywhere now. Social media, trailers, commentary channels, fan edits. Kody felt hunted by a truth he could no longer outrun. Hours passed. Finally, Robin came downstairs, clutching a tissue and avoiding his eyes. She sat on the sofa and waited for him to speak. When he didn't, she finally whispered, "You have to fix this." He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Fix what?" he asked. "The show? The family? The image? Christine made sure I can't fix anything." Robin shook her head. "You're wrong. This isn't about Christine. It's about you." And that sentence hit him harder than anything Christine had revealed. He sat down opposite her. For the first time in a long time, he asked a genuine question. "What do I do?" Robin looked at him exhausted. "You tell the truth. The real truth. Not the version you tell to protect yourself. The truth everyone else already knows." He felt his throat tighten. Honesty was something he used strategically, not emotionally. But now, the strategy had collapsed. And the truth, the real truth, was the only thing left that might save what remained of his reputation, his family, or even himself. He got up again, this time walking to the window and staring out into the darkness. The house opposite had all its lights off. The neighborhood was still. But he knew viewers around the country were wide awake, discussing him, dissecting him, analyzing every word he said in the episode. And tomorrow, there would be new commentary, new reactions, new clips. He couldn't escape it. Somewhere miles away, Christine slept peacefully. Toward dawn, after hours of silence, Kody finally sat down at the kitchen table and started writing something. Maybe an apology, maybe a public statement, maybe something for the producers. He didn't know. But for the first time, he wasn't writing from a place of anger. He wasn't writing to defend or manipulate. He was writing because the walls had closed in and he had nowhere left to hide behind excuses or blame. By the time the sun rose, he realized something that weighed heavier than everything put together. Christine wasn't the villain of his story. She had become the mirror, and he just didn't like what he saw. And that was the moment Kody understood the truth he had avoided for years. Christine didn't destroy him. She revealed him. And now, the whole world finally could see him with clarity.